Welcome, GOAT Format Duelists. It's my favorite time of the month, and that's when we get to look at the top placing GOAT Format decks from the past month of tournaments. Today, I've got 4 decks to show you that are both quite innovative and powerful. These are decks that, at a minimum, you will need to be aware of if you're going to play in any upcoming GOAT Format tournaments, as you don't want to be taken by surprise. And as a brief aside, I will say I always find it very difficult to choose which 4 decks to feature every month, as there are just so many cool decks that are worth going over. So much so that this month I will have some additional videos consisting of deep dives into more of these top placing decks that are making a big splash in GOAT format. So if you don't want to miss those future videos, you know what to do. Welcome to GOAT Duels, I'm ACP, and I want to get started off here by highlighting this 3rd place Warrior deck from Ludovico Rizzo. This player finished 3rd in 2 separate tournaments, both with a ton of players. Very, very impressive, of course. And I know some of you are thinking, haven't you talked about Warriors enough yet? Yes, in pretty much every video we've talked about Warriors. There are a lot of different builds here. This one is a little different than the ones that I highlighted before, and I also included it because I think one of the big narratives for June is that Warriors really made the case that, hey, we're secretly the best deck in the format, not Chaos. In this particular tournament that Ludovico Rizzo got 3rd in, we also had Warriors getting 1st and 4th. So that's 3 out of the top 4 spots. Warriors really is the anti-chaos deck of the format, and it's got pretty good matchups across the board. Main deck Mind Control, of course, still very popular. Great anti-chaos tool. You'll see we've also got one in the side. Trap Dust Shoot. Warriors are pretty much always playing 2 or 3 of this card now. I know in the past you saw some Warrior decks that maybe didn't play it. Maybe they sided it. But now I think this is pretty much just a main deck staple for Warriors. It's just so good against Chaos and so good with your attacking-based game plan that you've got to include it. And of course, the Kaiku, that's been a staple in Warriors for a long time. Great anti-Chaos card as well. Now, this build of Warriors is a little different. We've got the Dakochis, the Spies, the One Magician of Faith. Some people refer to this list as Flip Warriors. To me, Warriors is Warriors. And Dakochi and Spy, as it turns out, are low-key pretty good aggressive monsters. That is why these 2 cards see quite a lot of play in GOAT format. Players like to be active and put pressure on their opponent. And if you're a newer player to GOAT format, you might think, why is Dakochi so popular and cards like Magical Merchant and Dark Mimic level 1 not really that popular at all? The reason is because of that 1400 attack. You can flip the Dakochi, draw a card, poke for 14, and your opponent isn't really going to want to use their removal on it, right? They're not going to mirror force your Dakochi. They're just going to let the hit go through. And at some point, you have that inevitability. Hey, how many Dakochi hits are you willing to take? So this deck utilizes Dakochi quite well. I will say, however, there is a bit of an opportunity cost to playing these in that you'll notice we do not have a Donzlug in this deck. I like Donzlug quite a bit, to be honest. It's a nice card to play if your opponent doesn't have a monster in play. But if you gotta cut something, I could see why you'd cut the Donzlug. The Mystic level 2 and the Blade Knight, I think, are more important, especially in this meta. Sometimes your Donzlug is just gonna hit their Thunder Dragon or their Knight Assailant. Maybe you don't get tons of value out of that, so I think that's fine. However, if you were to take this deck and consider changing the monster lineup, I think Zaborg is a strong option. Now, good GOAT format players, we've all known for a long time, Zaborg is the premier light anti-chaos monster in GOAT format. So if you want another light, Zaborg's a great choice. Zaborg's got a great effect, popping those face-down monsters. Warriors has trouble dealing with Spy to some extent. Zaborg can help you with that. And of course, Zaborg's 2400 attack, great at attacking over Chaos Sorcerer as well. So if you want yet another tool for the Chaos matchup, I think you could fit that Zaborg either in the main or maybe one in the side. That's it for this Warrior deck here. I'm not going to get too much in the weeds with all of the side deck choices and the main deck choices. I think the side is pretty standard. This deck is good. It's going to keep doing well, whether we see the variant with the flips or the more standard build of Warriors. Our second deck for this month is a Panda Burn deck list by Return Winner. And like the last deck that we featured, Return Winner actually got top 8 in 2 separate tournaments with this deck. The consistency is always really admirable, and Return Winner is someone that we've definitely seen put up some good showings before. Now, Panda Burn and Burn in general, I know most of you guys, it's not your favorite deck. It's not a deck that you like to see, but we live in a world that has Panda Burn, right? So it is a deck that you need to be prepared for. And why did Panda Burn put up such good numbers this month? It's because people didn't respect it enough. That's all that happened. People were cutting back on those Mystic Walks in their side deck and various other anti-burn cards. A lot of side decks that you saw, their anti-burn card was like one Mobius. And I hate to say it, guys, but that just isn't going to cut it. So unless you're really confident that Panda Burn is not coming out to play, you've got to have some sort of a game plan for it. If you're in a big tournament, it is a deck that you're probably going to see at least once in the brackets. There's a pretty good chance. So you definitely don't want to just get stomped by the Pandas. And again, I won't really talk too much about all of the card choices. This is a deck that most of you guys are probably already pretty familiar with. However, I do want to talk about some of the key synergies here that are often a little misunderstood. One is Giant Trunade. People might wonder, why exactly is a burn deck playing a card like Giant Trunade? And it has a couple of cool synergies in this deck. One is the obvious one, which is that Panda needs to be attacking. It's got a big attack stat most of the time if you're using it correctly. It has trample. You want to make sure that attack goes through. And Giant Trunade is great for that purpose. Now, we also have the classic synergy of Giant Trunade Morphing Jar. You can set the Morphing Jar next turn, Trunade all of your opponent's back rows, set your own back rows, flip your Morphing Jar, and when that happens, your Trunade is a lot like a Harpy's Feather Duster in that sense, because you're just sort of killing all their back rows for free. Pretty cool. However, the other synergy that I want to talk about is Giant Trunade with Chain Energy. And Chain Energy is a really great burn card in GOAT format. It can definitely rack up tons of damage. Great against combo decks in particular, although combo isn't really as popular as it used to be. But what you can do is you can activate Chain Energy, and if your opponent pays life to set back rows, maybe you have a Chain Energy in play, and they set, I'm going to set a Mirror Force and a Ring of Destruction. They pay 1,000. What you can do is you can activate Giant Trunade the next turn, move all those back rows to their hand, activate the Chain Energy again after you set your back rows, of course, and now they have to pay those life points again. They'll basically have to pay twice, which is a cool, mild synergy that this deck has. The traps here are pretty standard. Side deck, nothing really worth talking about, I think. Here, we do see the 2 mind controls on the side. Sometimes with these Rescue Cat decks or Panda decks, you might see the mind controls in the main. I haven't really tested it too much, so I can't say whether it's better in the side or the main, but just something to be aware of. We also have the 2 Kaikus in the side, which you don't really see a lot in a burn deck. I'm not sure what the plan is against Chaos. Maybe we take out the level limit and the Gravity Bind and bring in the Kaiku so that those hits can get through. Also, we've got Crossout for the Chaos decks as well, I would assume. One unusual choice, although I believe Return Winner didn't play this in the other lists that he topped with, is Amazonas Archer. And this effect, it can inflict 1,200 damage. That's not too shabby. And as it turns out, it's pretty good in the Panda Burn Mirror. If you expect that to be a thing, you can tribute those Ojama tokens, deal your opponent 1,200 damage. They're really going to hate that. That is something that the Mirror is not going to be happy to see. And of course, it can just close out a game, right? Your opponent's low on life. Maybe you've got something like a giant rat in play, and you decide, hey, I'm going to summon Amazonas Archer, tribute the rat off and itself, and deal our opponent 1,200, close the game out. Congrats to Return Winner on the double finish. And like I said, guys, don't sleep on Panda Burn. You're going to regret it. Third on our list for this month, we have got a first place Reasoning Gate deck from Paede. And Reasoning Gate, I think it is a massively underrated deck in GOAT format. I think it's always worth talking about, and I certainly think that getting first place in a GOAT format tournament with it is quite impressive. However, I do have a bit of a hot take on this Reasoning Gate archetype as a whole, which is that I think there are a lot of different ways to play the Reasoning Gate strategy, And I think which one you choose doesn't matter that much. I think what matters a lot more is how you play the deck, because Reasoning Gate, in my opinion, is probably one of the most frequently misplayed decks, and that is something that I talked about in a recent video that I uploaded about a month ago. So if you want to pick up this deck, I would focus a lot more on making sure that your plays are solid and not so much the finite details of, oh, should I play this card or that card? Because the engine is really strong, and if you play it well, you are going to put up good results with this deck, as we saw from Paede. But moving on to the deck list itself, I think this deck list is pretty good, and I think it is a massive improvement of the sub-archetype that people often referred to as Noel Gate. Noel Gate, this style, had a much slimmer monster lineup and was more focused around sort of turboing into these powerful monsters like Dark Magician of Chaos and Jinzo, rather than diluting your deck with some of the less powerful options like Air Knight Parshath and, to some extent, Bullowback Dragon, Fusler, things like that. You're just trying to get to the really strong monsters really quickly. This is sort of more of a no-nonsense version of Reasoning Gate, whereas maybe the more typical Reasoning Gate deck is a bit more diversified. However, the big changes from Noel Gate are ones that I like. First of all, we are playing the 3 scapegoats. The Noel Gate list in the past, it didn't play scapegoats because of the idea that, hey, playing something like Reload that draws us cards would be better. I do think, though, that Scapegoat is really kind of like secretly the best card in Reasoning Gate. I know that sounds like kind of crazy, but the fact that it's an enabler for your Monster Gate and it protects your life points so that you can use Dimension Fusion, to me, that is just so strong. And when I play Reasoning Gate, I just always want to have Scapegoat in my opening hand. Like, to me, if I have Scapegoat in my opening hand, I almost don't even care what the other 5 cards are, because Scapegoat is just that good. So I like that we're playing 3 Scapegoats. Now, we do have that Toon Table, Toon Cannon Soldier engine for thinning out our deck. Note that Toon Cannon Soldier, pretty good with Scapegoat, right? We can get those extra goats off the field, deal our opponents some damage. That's always wonderful. We're playing the 3 Jar of Greeds and the 2 Upstart for more card draw. I like that. However, we are not playing the Thunder Dragon plus Reload engine, and that was one of the most often criticized components of the Noel Gate deck. Now, I think a lot of that criticism was unwarranted. I think you definitely can play Thunder Dragon if you want to, but I think it's not necessarily something that we need. And yeah, Thunder Dragon Reload can be a pretty good combo for thinning out your deck, putting a light in your grave, which of course is always important. But Paede decided to get greedy and said, well, look, I have 2 Sacred Cranes, that's 2 lights. If I mill BLS, that's another light. Do I really need more than 3 lights, especially with all of the deck thinning that I'm doing? And it turns out the answer is, yeah, you don't need more lights than that. You don't need to play Thunder Dragons for additional lights. This is fine. And here you'll notice that we're only playing 3 Chaos Monsters. We're not playing that 3rd Chaos Sorcerer. And you, of course, have Monster Reincarnation to get one of them back. You can get Monster Reincarnation with Dark Magician of Chaos. You're going to see Dark Magician of Chaos quite a bit in this deck, again, because it's just so focused, so monster-light. I really think that this is a solid deck list. Now, it does have some downsides. It does have some things that I think could be changed. One thing is that, now I can understand maybe why you don't want to play 3 Metamorphosis in this deck, but I think you could play 1. I don't think playing 1 Metamorphosis would be too crazy. For one thing, it's a decent demock target, right? Sometimes you get Dark Magician of Chaos off your Monster Gate or whatever, and maybe your opponent has some goat tokens in play, and you just want to go, hey, I want to get back my Metamorphosis, go into Gatling Dragon, blow up some tokens, and then additionally, after you Metamorphosis that Dark Magician of Chaos, now you can get it back with Dimension Fusion. So the deck kind of has a lot of like crazy combos with Metamorphosis that extends your reach, lets you deal more damage, lets you deal with more threats. That, to me, I think it's worth playing at least 1. That would be what I would say. And of course, you can Metamorphosis a goat token, get Thousand Eyes, stall the game out a little, especially against decks like Warriors. That's something that you want. And I will say, one of the weaknesses of this deck is that we don't have a lot of ways to deal with Kaiku. So if we played Metamorphosis, that at a minimum would be one potential out to a Kaiku. Our outs for Kaiku in this case are basically Lightning Vortex. If we have something in our grave like Jinzo, usually they won't banish it because they're scared of Dimension Fusion. So, okay, maybe we can premature our Jinzo and attack over Kaiku. Now, I mean, we do have some options in the side for dealing with Kaiku. We have Mirror Force, we have Torrential, we have Ring, we have Raigeki Break. So that's a possibility. But compared to the typical Reasoning Gate list, we are a little light on answers for Kaiku. The good news, though, is that this isn't the era where we see Chaos decks maining Kaiku a lot for the mirror. It's really just the 2 or 3 Kaikus coming from the Warriors. So maybe 1 out of 4 matchups are going to have Kaikus, right? So that's not too bad. And one thing, though, that I do like about this deck, something that is probably even more popular than Kaiku, is Trap Dust Shoot. And this deck does not care about Trap Dust Shoot at all. Like, oh, you're going to Dust Shoot my Toon Cannon Soldier. Nice. Oh, you're going to Dust Shoot my Sacred Crane. Who cares? You're going to Dust Shoot my Jinzo. Cool story. Yeah, if they Dust Shoot your BLS or your Sorcerer, maybe that's something that matters. A lot of times it won't, and to be honest, a decent amount of the time, they're just going to Dust Shoot and just see no monsters. Like, okay, here are my 6 spells, and enjoy the info. But yeah, I like this list a lot, and I will say, from watching Paede, I did go back and watch some of those matches. Paede played pretty much perfectly in all the matches that I saw. He played this deck exactly the way that it's meant to be played. So, again, I'm going to have that video later where you can listen to my advice on how to play Reasoning Gate correctly, because people make tons of mistakes with this deck, and to some extent even against this deck. Last but not least, I wanted to close out with a fun one here from Yada Yada. This is an 8th place Chaos deck. Maybe people would call this Chaos Turbo. I don't know how you kids name your decks these days, but the deck list here, yeah, we've got some standard choices. 2 Dakochi, 3 Spy, 2 Magician of Faith, 3 Thunder Dragons, 2 Night Assailants. Okay, everything's looking pretty normal so far. Until we see, oh wait, we've also got 2 Mask of Darkness. We don't have 1, but we have 2 Tsukiyomis. And this Mask of Darkness, needless to say, has some interesting targets. And now I'm not necessarily sure if this list is, super competitive. I think it has some advantages that I want to talk about. First is my personal preference. I don't really like Solemn Judgment in your typical Chaos deck. Solemn Judgment is not a card that I'm really going out of my way to play in a Chaos deck just because I value my life points too much. However, if you did force me to play multiple Solemn Judgments in my Chaos deck, I would definitely want to play Mask of Darkness with it, because to me it's kind of go big or go home. Like, either we're all in on the Solemns or we're not. This deck definitely can go all in on the Solemns. It's got that sort of classic, flip control combo of Mask of Darkness, Solemn Judgment, Tsukiyomi. And of course, we got plenty of other good combos as well. Way back, what we called flip control, it was a deck that was kind of popular in GOAT format. Again, kind of a deck that went all in on Tsukiyomi. And from my experience playing that deck, one of the best openings that you could have, arguably the best opening you could have, is if you had Mask of Darkness plus Ring of Destruction. It was very difficult for your opponent to win if you had that particular combo on turn 1, because you would, you'd set your mask with the ring turn 1. They would try to deal with it somehow. They might have Breaker, they might have Mystic Tomato, they might have Blade Knight, whatever it is. You would ring their guy, deal them a bunch of damage, flip up your mask, get back your ring, mask attacks for 900, and then you just set ring again. And you've just decimated their life points at that point. I mean, sure, maybe you've only done, 2,500 so far if you ring to Breaker and attack with the mask, but now they're at 55, you're going to be able to ring something else, and then they have the threat of Tsukiyomi or Bookamoon could come down later, get the ring again. So ring actually gets pretty ridiculous with mask. It definitely feels very unfair. Never tried that strategy with Magic Cylinder, but I mean, it could work depending on what monsters they play and if you're able to deal with them. Now, of course, if they have some big monster and you cylinder it, well, they're still going to have that big monster the next turn. So you kind of need to come up with a plan for that. But if you cylinder something maybe like Mystic level 2. Yeah, you're not dealing a lot of damage, but you did deal 900. You did protect your mask. Now you can flip the mask, get back Cylinder, have the mask trade with the Mystic, or maybe run it over with Tsukiyomi or something. It's a possibility. The other combo that this deck is going for with mask is mask plus Reckless Greed. To me, I think that's a little gimmicky. I think that's a little out there, but, I respect that we're trying something new. Now, personally, I think, going with something like Jar Greed might just be a little safer overall. But Reckless Greed, it can be a good card. If it's late in the game, both players' life points are low, you just want to draw cards. Like, you're just trying to end the game. You don't care if you skip draw phases. So I think Reckless Greed, it can be pretty good in the late game, arguably better than Jar Greed in the late game, and good with Mask of Darkness, too. If I change this deck, I would say I might want to find a way to slim down the monster lineup a little, just because I feel like these Tsukiyomi decks usually want to play more back rows and fewer monsters. So I think we could maybe cut like one Spy, maybe even cut one Night Assailant, something like that. Go down to 20 or 19 monsters. I think that would be a little better than 21. I'm also not even sure if we even have to play Tribe in this deck. Like, if our opponent has a wall of Spies or something, do we really care? Do we need to clear them out? Right? To me, I just feel like we don't care what our opponent has as long as we're flipping our Mask or our Dekochi or our Faith a bunch of times. So, yeah, that's kind of my view. I think in some senses with the monster lineup, maybe Yada Yada stayed too close to the norm where he could have maybe changed it up a little more. One thing that I also want to call out that I think was a really good idea and Yada is not going to get enough credit for is not maining Heavy Storm. And Heavy Storm, I think, is like low-key one of the most overrated cards in GOAT format. Like, it's obviously very good. It's definitely better than your average card in GOAT format, but I think a lot of people think Heavy Storm is way better than it actually is, just because a lot of decks in GOAT format are just playing a bunch of chainables, right? We saw that the Reasoning Gate deck, for example. You don't want Heavy Storm against that. I have so many people try to argue that, oh no, you're supposed to like keep it in just in case they have a Mirror Force. Like, no, you're not. Heavy Storm is not good against 90% of Reasoning Gate decks. And with the direction that Chaos decks are going, it's not really that great against them either. Like, everything's chainable. They're going to chain Jar Greed. They're going to chain Raigeki Break. They're going to, flip their Dust Shoot before you even activate your Heavy Storm. Like, yeah, you can kill their Mirror Force. Yes, you can kill their Ring. But against a decent player and in the current meta, you're not going to get a ton of value out of Heavy Storm. However, definitely like it being sided because Heavy Storm is very strong against Warriors, right? Heavy Storm is great against those set all my back rows kinds of decks like Warriors, even to some extent against Panda Burn, although, Panda Burn does have chainables, but against burn decks, you can kill their Nightmare Wheel, you can kill their Gravity Bind, whatever. Against a lot of the more popular decks in GOAT format, Heavy Storm is just not that great. Even against your average Chaos Control deck, they're just going to chain Scapegoat or whatever. So, you certainly could main it in most decks, but I could see why this particular deck didn't main it, because Yada reasoned, like, I'm usually going to have more back rows set than my opponent, so why would I want Heavy Storm? I'm totally on board with that. As far as the side deck goes, it's pretty standard. Nothing really jumps out at you. I will say, yeah, everyone is siding Sakuratsus these days, but in this deck, you definitely kind of want to side them, right? Because against Warriors, you want to be recycling your Sakuratsu armor with your Mask of Darkness and kind of just killing all the things. That's definitely something that you want to go for. This is a fun deck. It's got some new choices. Magic Cylinder in particular, it's a card that saw a decent amount of play in actual 2005 GOAT format. Not really the best card today because, yes, technically it is a -1, but I think there are some instances where you can get a lot of value out of it. And in particular, if you expect a lot of other people to be playing their own Solemn Judgments, all of a sudden Magic Cylinder looks a lot better, especially when you can get it back with Mask of Darkness. You put your opponent in a situation where they just feel like, wait, how can I ever attack? Yeah, congratulations to Yada Yada. This is a fun deck, and that wraps it up for this month. And if you like this video and you want to find out more about how to play Reasoning Gate correctly, go watch this video here.